Hey everyone, this week you are going to talk about one of your favorite things. Books.
I do all the books.
Yeah, she does all the books. I just do audiobooks pretty much. So I'm not going to bore you with that, but because I'm not as passionate about books as this girl is, I'm going to step out and let you take over. Sound good?
Okay. I'm super excited because today I get to talk to you about books, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. And Chris makes fun of me as often as he can because I tend to relate everything to a book that I've read. Talking about something in a conversation with someone, something reminds me of a book all the time. So I just can't help it. I just love books. Everything reminds me of different stories I've read. So I do have an Instagram that's called Carrie's Bookshelf. And I love that I created that about 2 years ago. It's so helpful for me because I just post a picture of the cover of almost every book I read. I don't post every single one because every once in a while, I just don't even want a book associated with me. I don't want people to think I was recommending it, so I don't post it. But usually even books that I don't recommend, I'll post on there and write a review. So it's really helpful because I can look back and I can see all the books that I read over the past year, and I can see my review and be reminded because somehow even if a book was one of my very favorites, I can sort of forget some of the reasons why. So I looked back through that today to think about some of the categories that were my favorites from the last year that I wanted to tell you about. I would love to also hear what some of your genre favorites are that I didn't talk about. So if you have any, please put those in the comments. Let me know what genres that I missed that you think I should have covered. The first one I'm going to cover is usually my favorite genre, which is historical fiction. My favorite historical fiction book that I read in the last year is called Where the Lost Wander, and it's by Amy Harmon. And this book was one of those first read books on Kindle. Every month they send you, Kindle or Amazon sends a few books that you can get for free on Kindle. And usually I'll pick a few and download them and I'll start reading them. And if it piques my interest, I'll keep going. If not, I'll just forget about it because it was free anyway. This one was free and it was so good. I love it when one of them works out. It is a story about the Oregon Trail, and it is based on the author's family history of what she's learned, and the rest of it is fictional, but still based on some real characters. And it is just so interesting to hear the story of a family going west on the Oregon Trail. It's so much, the Oregon Trail is difficult. Lots of people played Oregon Trail when they were kids, the computer game. But all those things that happen in that game are actually happening on the Oregon Trail. They're encountering Indians. There's all kinds of disease. People are dying right and left. So it's pretty depressing, but it's also a really good story and just helps you to just understand a little bit more about how it worked to go west on the Oregon Trail. So that was my favorite historical fiction book of the year. As far as historical fiction, if I'm going to give a close second, that would be The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin. I mean, it's from my favorite era, which is World War II, but it was a little bit of a different take on it than I've read before. I just love it when you get kind of a new perspective. So this was another really good historical fiction book. The next category I want to talk about is my favorite author of 2022. What I mean by that is it just seems like pretty much every year I find a new author that becomes my favorite author that year. 2020, my favorite author was Jojo Moyes. 2021, my favorite author was Charles Martin. And this year, my favorite author has been Liane Moriarty. And I have now read, I think 6 of her books. Usually I can't read that many books by an author because they start to get repetitive. They have a lot of the same themes over and over. You see very similar ideas in different books. I've noticed that with my other favorites, because once I get an author that I really like, I just start reading all their books. But Liane Moriarty, she is so good. She's definitely my new favorite. In the last few months, I think I've read 3 books by her. And what I love about her is her style. So what she'll do is she'll develop several characters, and each character, you kind of jump from perspective from character to character, and each character will have their own conflict or issue or problem that you're following them with. And then all of the characters at the same time are going towards like a larger overall conflict in the story. Almost all of her books are like that. Not every single one. But for a while, usually it's kind of hard to figure out how the characters are going to come together. What is the thing they have in common? And eventually you get there, and sometimes there's some sort of mystery involved. So she is just a great writer. I love how she develops characters, and then she always has really good stories too. So Liane Moriarty, she is my favorite writer this year. If you want to look at my Instagram, Carrie's Bookshelf, you can see reviews on all the different books that I read by her this year and last year, actually. But this year, she was my favorite author. The next category I want to talk to you about is memoirs. I love reading memoirs. I love a great memoir. And this year I had two that are very different from each other that were just so interesting. And I just love when a memoir, I mean, I guess this is what I love about books in general, is when it can just give you kind of a slice of life that is very different from your own, that helps you understand a different kind of person or a different era, different time period, different setting, anything like that than what I'm normally used to. I'd say probably my favorite memoir this year was Hunger by Roxane Gay. It is just an amazing, eye-opening, gut-wrenching book. So Hunger is about Roxane Gay, and she is a famous author, actually. She's written several books. I haven't read any of her other books, but she is a extremely overweight woman. She talks about her life, and as the title of the book is Hunger, all the things that she's gone through in her life that have contributed to her body, how she sees her body, how other people see her body, and some really difficult things happened to her when she was 12 years old that all contribute to that. It's a hard book to read, but I guess I like books like that. I like books that have a lot of depth and dealing with difficult things. It might not be a book that's for everyone, but for me, it opened my eyes to some things that were relatable in ways that I was surprised about, but also it was just really eye-opening to how someone lives who's very different from me. The other memoir that I really love this year is called Lion by Saru Bierli. I probably said his name wrong. So interesting. True story about a young boy in India who gets lost and is on a train, just gets completely lost when he was a little kid. And so it's his story. He ends up getting adopted by a family in Australia, but he is going back to find his family once he's an adult. I loved what he talked about at the end, because his childhood was in extreme poverty. And so he also just really addresses how to help in the world with problems like poverty. And one of the things that he says is to become a sponsor of a child is something that can be actually really life-changing. There's just a lot that I learned from that, but it was just really neat to hear from someone like him that things like sponsorships can actually really help children. My next category is best overall literature. So what I mean by that is the book with the most literary qualities, I guess I would say. You know, I love all different kinds of books. I love tons of different genres, but I really do love books that are really well written and then have excellent storylines and also have a good amount of depth to them. And so having all those things, I would say, would cause a book to be considered, really good literature. So this book is called Hamnet, and it's by Maggie O'Farrell. And this book took me a while to get into. I almost stopped reading because it's one of those books that takes a while. And I guess that's actually a question I have for you is, how long do you keep reading until you give up on a book? I've given up on several books this year. I just thought after a certain amount of time, okay, I'm not going to waste my time anymore. And usually it has something to do with, I don't like the writing, the way that the writer does lots of different things, the words they use. I don't know. I guess I get nerdy about that. This book I could tell it was well written from the start, but it was just kind of hard to follow. I couldn't see where it was going. And sometimes I don't like to know a ton about a book before I start it, because if there's any kind of surprise, I want to be surprised. If something's been recommended to me or it has really high ratings, I'll just go ahead and read it. So this book was recommended and I just kept going, and I'm so glad I did, because finally, I don't know where it was, maybe around page 100, it really pulled me in, and the rest of the book really amazed me. So it is a fictional tale really about Shakespeare's family, but it's really not at all focused on Shakespeare. He's a very minor character in the book. He's actually never referred to as Shakespeare. You know he's Shakespeare because I think it tells you at the very beginning. It's not about him. It's about his family. And his son's name was actually Hamnet, and that is one of the main characters this book is about. And of course, you know, he wrote Hamlet, which I don't know how much was actually inspired by his son who died, Hamnet. You also know that from the very beginning of the book. Oh, it is just such a beautiful story. That's one that I will also definitely read again someday, because it was just an amazing, amazing book. Another genre or category that I really actually enjoy is a good YA book, a good young adult book. The Library of Lost Things. It's by Laura Taylor Namey. This book was so good. I haven't gotten Lindsay to read it yet because she loves to read also, and this is a YA book, but she has a lot of other books that she's been focused on this year. And then of course she has books for school too, but I know that she would love this book. It is about a young girl. Okay, let me start over. A teenage girl whose mother is a hoarder. And it's not just like no big deal kind of hoarding. It's like a definite mental illness. It's this teenager trying to figure out how to live her life and kind of hide the problems at home, but try to help her mom, but she can't help her mom, and how to juggle all of those things together, and also have friends and relationships and become her own person while still needing to help her mom. Super interesting, really well written YA book. So those are all the genres that I wanted to tell you about, or all the categories I wanted to tell you about. As far as my top 5 books of the year, I'm not going to put them in order, but one of them is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is one of the first books I read this year. All these books you should definitely read, the ones on my top 5 list, because it's really hard to decide between them. And I just love a book that you just don't want to stop reading. You want to keep going, and it's really interesting. This book for sure. It was so different. It's about a person who somehow gets the choice to live different kinds of lives that she could have lived, and seeing a glimpse of what her life would be like if different decisions or things had happened in different ways in her life. It's just really amazing and hopeful, and just a great book. So definitely read that. I also wonder, have you read any other books by Matt Haig? Because he was such a great writer. I want to read something else by him, but I have not picked another book yet. So if there's another great book by him, let me know. The second one that's definitely on this list I already talked about is Hamnet. That was an excellent book. I loved it. Definitely on my top 5 for this year. Again, not in order, but the third one I'm going to talk about as far as my top 5 favorite books is Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. So I talked to you about Liane Moriarty. It was really hard for me to decide which of her books I would put on my top 5 list, but I think Big Little Lies is my favorite, although What Alice Forgot was also really good, but I read that one last year. So Big Little Lies, I know there's some kind of series on one of the streaming services, Big Little Lies. I think it's set in a different location. All of Liane Moriarty books are set in Australia. She's an Australian author. Just like I described how Liane Moriarty writes, she just has several different characters. They're all going through something different. They have surprising things going on in their lives. And this one is all leading up to something that you know is going to happen, but you're not sure how it's going to happen. Anyway, it's an excellent book. Definitely read that one. Another favorite this year was actually recommended to me by Chris. So that's really surprising, right? That one is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And it was such a good book. I know there's a movie out. If you've seen the movie, yes, the movie is good, but the movie is completely different than the book. The book is much better, but it's also very, very different. So if you liked the movie, definitely read the book. It is so good. I love how it's set in two very different worlds. You have the real world in the future, and then you have the video game virtual reality that the main characters are living in. It's like all of these things that are basically impossible are actually possible because they're happening in a video game, but it feels really real. And it is real because there's real consequences that happen based on what's happening in that virtual world. So, excellent book. It has a ton of 80s nostalgia in it, even though it's set in the future. So that's also a really interesting choice that author made that I really enjoyed. I have also read Ready Player 2. I read that this year also. It was also very good, but not as good as Ready Player 1. That is excellent. I have to pick one more book to be on my top 5. It's really hard because I read a lot of very good books this year. My 5th book that I'm going to pick is called Call Your Daughter Home by Deb Spira. This story reminded me of a merging of some of my favorite books that I've read before. It reminds me of the writing of Kristen Hanna, reminds me a little bit of Where the Crawdads Sing. It is a story about a family in the South, and it's one of those books that is really deep. You get to know the characters really well, and something really surprising happens that is difficult to experience through the book. I like books that go deep like that. I know not everyone does, but it was a great book. So I really recommend that one too. What I would love is if in the comments you could let me know a bunch of questions that I really want to know the answer to. First, have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? Second, I would love book recommendations. I'm always looking for the next great book. I have tons of books that are on my list, but I always need more because sometimes I'm looking through the list and none of them look good right now. So if you have a book that you think that I would love, please tell me about it. What are your favorite genres? What are some genres that you wish I would have talked about? What books do you have that you're looking forward to reading that you haven't read yet, but you want to read? And lastly, do you have a favorite author this year? Who are your favorite authors? And in 2022, who was your favorite author? Right now, I'm reading Matthew Perry's memoir, which is called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. It's really, really good. I'm enjoying that a lot, so I'll be reviewing that soon. I have a few other books that I plan on reading soon. I'm going to read The Glass Castle, which tons of people have recommended, and I don't know how I haven't read it yet. Be sure to comment and let me know what books you think I should read next. Hi.
Oh, hi. How you doing? How was you doing your very first solo YouTube?
I didn't think about that till now, but I'm glad that I didn't because that makes me nervous.
Oh, okay.
It's not silly. You're right here.
Well, I'm right here, but you did a great job.
Aw, thanks.
Yeah.
Were you actually listening?
I was. I heard you mention me about Ready Player One.
Ah, okay. You were listening.
Yeah. That's a great book, by the way. That's my book recommendation because I'm re-listening to it right now because what made me want to reread it was we watched it. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, none of this happens in the book.
None.
Okay, so a lot of it doesn't happen this way in the book.
Yeah, it's so different.
It had also been a while since I read it.
Yeah.
So it made me want to re-listen to it again.
Yeah. So have you just started it?
About, I think, a third of the way through it.
Isn't it good?
Yeah, it's good.
It's so good.
So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you had fun sharing all that.
That reminds me. Okay, so if you are going to listen to Ready Player One on Audible, it is read by Will Wheaton, which is really fun too.
Yeah, well, he's a sci-fi actor with Star Trek.
And also he's mentioned in the book, so that's kind of fun.
That's true.
When you hear him mention his own name, he has, you can kind of tell he has a smirk on his face, even though you can't see his face.
Yeah, no, he did a good job with it. So definitely worth a listen if you really like audiobooks.
Yeah.
Next week, I think we're just going to do another everyday life vlog, which we've been doing a lot more of those lately because we don't really have any travel things coming up anytime soon.
Yeah, we're staying home a lot lately.
We are, and probably for the next few months.
I just remembered one other thing I love to read.
Oh, boy.
I also love to read when people send us Christmas cards.
That's true.
Yeah. So some of you have sent us some Christmas cards, and I have loved reading those. And we're sending you a Christmas card back. So if you haven't sent us a Christmas card yet, we would love to exchange Christmas cards with you.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about that, just check out the link in the description below about how to do that, where to send it to our P.O. box, and all that fun stuff. When you said I have one more thing to I'm like, is this video ever going to end?
Maybe.
Maybe. We like to keep everyone guessing, including ourselves. So like I mentioned a moment ago, we'll have an Everyday Life vlog coming out soon, and we have the Christmas card exchange live stream on December 22nd. It's on a Thursday evening Pacific time. I don't know if we have a time yet, but we'll nail it down very soon and communicate that to everyone on our Instagram. So if you're not following us on Instagram, make sure you follow us there, because we communicate some things there as well. And we also share, like this month, we're sharing, at least I'm sharing, some of like what's in our advent calendars and fun things like that.
And don't forget to follow my Carrie's bookshelf on Instagram as well.
Yep, her Bookstagram.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys again so much for watching. We love you guys a lot, and we'll look forward to seeing you really soon. Bye.
Bye.